Well, good evening, folks. Now, if I were to ask you what is a poison, I expect that most of you would say something like, a poison is any substance that interferes with the functioning of cells. Right, you are. And if I asked you what then is a venom, you might say, well, strictly speaking, a venom is an injected poison. So I would say we're already off to a good start. And if I were to ask you as naturalists, what are venoms for? Then after a moment's thought, you would say, well, there are probably two main functions of venoms in the world. Predators can use them to subdue prey, and everything can use them to protect itself. Once again, right you are. So we're off to a very good start. What I want to do now is show you some examples of creatures that use venom. And as soon as I show you one or mention one, you will automatically think, well, is this mainly for subduing prey, or is it mainly for protecting themselves? And we'll see about that. So for instance, I'm not going to show you a picture of Steve Irwin's friend, the stingray, but you're pretty sure that the stingray is to protect itself from busybodies like Steve Irwin. Yes, please, Laura. Now here is a lionfish. I encountered it often in Southeast Asia, and it's now an invasive here. I haven't done much scuba diving, snorkel diving, but I imagine it's not too hard to find. And right away, you see those spines, which deliver venom. And obviously, I would say, for self-protection. Okay, let's look at some more examples. There are 4 species of snakes in Trinidad and Tobago. And if I were to ask you about what the pit vipers, the mapapis, do, then you might say, well, it probably serves both functions. We know that they use them to subdue prey, and they probably also use them to protect themselves against big animals. Cobras, same answer. But what about coral snakes? Well, coral snakes are not very good at biting something big. So protection, and plus they're mostly out of the way, hidden or underground. So that protection against predators is probably not a big part of their lives. But then you ask, well, why are they warning colored? So that protection almost certainly does have some function. And then there's the platypus. And the males, both the females and the males have spurs in their hind legs. And in the males, these are venomous. Now, why it's males and not females, nobody's ever explained that to me. I mean, I assume the females need protection as well, but that's just one of those little mysteries that's never been explained to me. Now, it will usually seem to you fairly obvious whether the venom apparatus in a given animal is mainly or entirely for one of these functions or the other. But sometimes it might not be obvious. So there on the left, you see your friend, the frangipani hawk moth caterpillar. And it's not venomous, but it is poisonous. And so it's going around with these, I mean, most caterpillars are very inconspicuous. So that they're playing can't be found. The frangipani hawk moth caterpillar, especially when it's an adult, is a great big thing, about the size of your little finger. And as you can see, it's sitting right out there in the open, flying the Pan-African colors, saying hello there. And that would immediately suggest to you that it's distasteful. I mean, the first thing I noticed when I saw these all over a frangipani tree was the Kiskadees weren't eating them. Well, I mean, Kiskadees eat everything, but not these. And you can determine the reason for that by taking a pin or a needle and just poking one lightly to get a little bit of the blood or hemolymph from it. Not enough to really damage it, but just enough, and then taste it. And you will immediately figure, your reaction will be, oh, geed. So that's a poisonous, but not a venomous caterpillar. On the right, we see a caterpillar that is probably venomous. Now, I haven't touched that particular one, but as a rule, many of those with spines like this have venom in their spines. And so occasionally I've gotten, by touching one, I've gotten in some rather enduring pain. Okay, now the next one, please. Okay, now this is to illustrate the point that the main function of venom is not always obvious. So here we have two kinds of arachnids. We've got a spider on the left, we've got a scorpion on the right. They're both predatory, they both have venom, but what's it for? Well, in the case of the spider, you know that they use them for subduing prey. So what this spider almost certainly did as soon as it sensed something wiggling in its web was to run down and bite it. So to slow it down, because if they don't do that, the prey will eventually get loose. The web doesn't stick them forever. But spiders are quite poor at defending themselves against big animals with venom. I very often pick them up and have seldom been bitten. So that's someplace where you might think, okay, it's for prey capture, also for self-defense. Probably not. On the other hand, there we have a scorpion. I dearly love scorpions, but once you've seen one, you've seen them all. And scorpions are also predators. There are no vegetarian scorpions. And of course, at the hind end, you see that stinger, which it is adept at deploying. So you might reasonably imagine that it uses the stinger as a matter of course to subdue its prey. But in fact, they usually do not. They usually will struggle with the prey unless the prey is really big and it is likely to damage them. They seem to be quite reluctant to sting. And why is that? I've never yet seen anybody try to explain that, but the obvious hypothesis is that venom is metabolically expensive. So if this one stings something right now, unnecessarily, and then along comes something really dangerous, it's already fired off its gun. It doesn't have any more. Okay, Laura, yes, please. So, are there venomous plants? And in fact, there are. There are lots of poisonous plants. There are plenty of things that you dare not eat out there. But venomous plants, nettles, for instance, everybody knows of nettles. But my favorite is this euphorbia, Cnidoscolus urens, which is known in English as burn bush, and in Spanish as mala mujer, which I think pretty much means the same thing. Okay, you can't speak Spanish, you don't realize that was a joke, never mind. But one thing you will notice on this one is these little spines sticking out. They're on the fruits, they're on the leaves, they're on the vines, they're everywhere. And we don't have Cnidoscolus urens very commonly in Trinidad, but some places up the islands, it forms these great big patches of it. And I guarantee, you run your hand through that and you will be hurting for quite a long time. Now, my main focus today is on a group of the order Hymenoptera, which are known commonly in English as the stinging insects. Yes, please, Laura. And these are most of, when you think of Hymenoptera, you're mostly thinking of the group Aculeata, which are known as stinging insects. So wasps, bees, ants. I think Richard was asking me if I'm also going to talk about woodlice. No, unfortunately not. But I could do that someday. I have actually lectured to this group on woodlice. Now, right here we have the venom apparatus of a typical social wasp. And what you can see, I think, is that there is this system of hard parts out here on the left, which you would call the stinger. And then there's a glandular part. So it's got the venom glands, VG out here, that produce the venom. And then they're stored in the venom sac and they can be expressed. And down here, you see the same as the part above, and it's just splayed out a little bit so that you can see it. And I think you can imagine that it is a mechanical device for delivering venom out through the sting shaft. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Now, yes, please, Laura. Now, because the stinging insects can sting, they are very often mimicked. Now, the classic examples we see of Batesian mimicry in textbooks elsewhere have to do with poisonous or distasteful and palatable butterflies. But there are also some wonderful examples in the among stinging insects and their mimics. So on the left, we see a yellow jacket wasp. It looks like it can sting you. It can sting you. And on the right, we see a hoverfly. And it's obviously a mimic of a yellow jacket wasp. And it probably gains a great deal of protection from predators by looking like something that they don't want to tackle. And so there are plenty of other insects that look like stinging insects. And one thing that really impressed me when I first came to the tropics was the abundance of these mimics, so that sometimes a given stinging insect or cluster of similar stinging insects is surrounded by a whole complex of mimics of various kinds. And so one thing I didn't mention is that the venom apparatus is derived from the reproductive apparatus of the female. So what does that mean? Males cannot sting. So here's an experiment that you might like to try sometime. If when you see a wasp that you are really quite sure is a male, you're probably not going to be sure very often, or a bee, pick that one up, grasp it in your fingers, and I'll tell you what it's going to do. Now, I see somebody chuckling there. What's it going to do? The male. Okay, what Laura doesn't want to say is he will twist around with his mobile abdomen and he'll stick you with his dick. And sometimes it can be really, I mean, it's not very pointed. It certainly has no venom, but I mean, it can be really quite impressive. And I once introduced a male wasp into a cage with a great big mantis, and the mantis grabbed it. We didn't have a really good grip, and the male turned around and he stuck him with his tallywhacker, and the mantis dropped it, and kept doing this over and over again until the mantis could get a grip where the male wasp, was truly helpless. That's an anecdote from my rich personal experience. Okay, so that this is a good example of automimicry. In other words, something mimicking itself. In this case, males mimicking females, which makes sense. I mean, you would have predicted that if I hadn't already told you about it, because what does a male wasp look like? Looks like a female wasp. Looks like something you don't want to tangle with. Now let's turn to solitary wasps. And here we see on the left a member of the genus Celephron. We also find them in Trinidad, lovely wasps that provision their cells with spiders. The female captures them and she stings them and puts them into the cell. And so therefore there you see a cell, and down at the bottom you see the larva, which has already begun to eat one of the eat one of the spiders. Now, it looks to you right now like all of those spiders are of the same species, and they probably are. One question that I have never seen studied with solitary wasps is there a learning process? Does a female wasp start out capturing whatever she can, and then when she finds something that is present and that she can handle it, in other words, she develops a search image for it, does she specialize in that? That's an interesting research question that has not yet been studied. Now, yes, please. Okay, here's my personal hero for almost 70 years now. This is Jean-Henri Fabre, the French entomologist who lived from 1823 to 1915. And there was a paper published on solitary wasps that preyed on and provisioned their cells with beetles. And in this paper, not by Fabre, it was suggested that injection of the venom was a preservative. So it killed the beetles and preserved them. It was effectively an embalming fluid. And Fabre said, no, I don't think so. And he demonstrated that what in fact happens is that it paralyzes the prey. This was his first big scientific success in 1855. It seems like it was just yesterday. So what he demonstrated was that it leaves them alive, but paralyzed, so that the larva can eat on one at a time and eat it in such a way that it doesn't die and putrefy before that larva has finished it. Okay, now the venom apparatus can be a very powerful defensive device. As you probably know from personal experience. But in some stinging insects, it no longer serves in subduing prey, only in self-defense. In defending itself, the wasp or bee itself, and defending the brood. And the proof of this, yes please, is found in bees. Now, I'm not going to ask you to define bees because this is going to be a little harder than the initial definitions we had. But bees are a distinctive lineage of wasps that have switched over from provisioning their brood with paralyzed or dead prey, in other words, animal prey, to pollen and nectar, so that they no longer have any need to paralyze anything, but they do defend themselves. So both solitary and social bees are able to defend themselves personally and defend their brood against natural enemies. Now, solitary wasps and bees, as a very strong general rule, do not attack and sting something as large as a human, or even something as large as a rat. They will flee from it. So that Celephron that I showed you, for instance, let's imagine that female was at the nest and you went up and you started dismantling the nest with her right there in front of her. All right. well, she's not going to attack and sting you. I guarantee it. Okay. And in fact, I was once studying a big nesting aggregation of large bees, about the size of our carpenter bees, nesting in the soil. And they found that there was a good nesting site, a good earth bank, and there were lots of them around. And I was walking around there, and they were flying all around me, these great big bees. And suddenly I realized I wasn't afraid of them, because I was quite sure that a solitary bee would not attack in defense of its nest, even if I was taking the nest apart and threatening its brood. Now, let's come to, yes, please. Let's come to the subject of sting autotomy. Now, you know a little bit of Latin, so autotomy, self-breaking, okay? Now, you have all heard that when a honeybee stings you, or something like another vertebrate with relatively thick rubbery skin, that she cannot retract the stinger. And usually that's true. So here is a Southeast Asian bee, and she's stinging my arm. I mean, you know, what I do for entomology, right? And she's stinging my arm, and she can't retract her stinger. It's stuck in there. Now, you're well aware when a Jack Spaniard stings you, she stings you and she flies away, or she comes back and stings you again. She can retract her stinger. Sting autotomy is something that is not found in very many wasps and bees. In bees, as far as I know, only in honeybees, the various species of honeybees. And so this is deadly to her. This is a prime example that people like to adduce of altruism in defense of her relatives in the colony. Now, whoops, excuse me. Now let's go back. No, go forward, please. Okay, here's this picture again. And this is going to show you why sting autotomy happens. Now, inside of the sting shaft are two very fine needle-like lancets. And at the tips of these lancets, there are backward, you see number D there, are backward directed barbs. Now, this is not a honeybee. This is a Jack Spaniard wasp. So she's got barbs as well. Virtually all aculeate Hymenoptera have barbs on the sting lancets. But in honeybees, and also in your beloved Jep tattoo. I mean, they're great. There's many of them, and they're much bigger. So that you can see how a Jack Spaniard would be able to, with ease, tear her stinger out of your skin, pardon me, your neighbor's skin when she stings you. But that a honeybee with much larger ones, or a Jep tattoo, might not be able to do so. And together with a student, we have demonstrated that as you would expect, nothing radical about it, the probability of sting autotomy is highly correlated with the number and strength of the barbs. And so what we did was we condensed that into a single index, which is known as the index of serration. Now, there's a very large literature on the effects of venoms of stinging insects, but it mostly has to do with medicine and pharmacology. The biological literature, in other words, looking at it from the point of view of the bugs themselves, is actually pretty sparse. But some of us are interested in looking at it from the insect's point of view and saying, well, what's it like? How does it serve in their biological success? What are the roles of the venom in its struggle for life? Edmund, come in. Now, the members of the general public often have difficulty understanding our interest in it. And I will illustrate that by way of a lecture from the first BioBlitz. Now, the ranking expert on scorpions in the Eastern Caribbean is Rakesh Bukkal. And Rakesh had collected a number of live scorpions. And so I said, okay, well, let's have one wander on my arm. Okay. And then totally unprovoked, that scorpion just swung around. I mean, really, I was not even saying bad things to it. Swung around and stung me in the arm. And so Rakesh and I did exactly what you would do. We said, okay, let's watch the symptoms. Now, this was on the Sunday, so the general public was all around us. And Rakesh, I'm giving Rakesh a running commentary on the symptoms. And Rakesh is taking notes with great interest. And I guarantee, if I had fallen down, frothing at the mouth and collapsed and died, Rakesh would have noticed that and he would have timed that. And then we look up and the members of the general public are going, what kind of guys are these? Well, field naturalists, you would have done the same thing. Don't prove me wrong. Venom can have two immediate effects. We're not talking about its functions in the life of the beast, but the effects on the stung animal. And these are, of course, pain and tissue damage. And if the tissue damage is very severe, it can lead to the Lord calling you home. Pardon me, the Lord calling somebody else home. As we saw with solitary wasps, it also can induce paralysis. Now, paralysis is relatively hard to quantify comparatively. I'm not aware that anyone has tried it. Has tried to compare the paralyzing power of different venoms, apart from the tissue damage. But tissue damage has been well quantified. It's been done in the lab, so that different venoms are ranked. They're according to the LD50. In other words, how much venom it takes to induce death in 50% of the standard laboratory animals, which are usually not human. They're usually white mice. Okay. In addition, as students, Justin Schmidt, whom you will see. In fact, let's see if we got him now. No, not that. I'll tell you what. I'm going to pass this this book around. Feel free to take a peek at it if you can in the dark. And Justin Schmidt and I devised a pain index from 0 to 4 for different stings. And I think you'll find it on page, starting on page 221. Now, I have had the pleasure to be stung by approximately 60 species of aculeates. Justin has been stung by many more than that. When he was knew he was on the way out, late in his life, he decided, well, I better write a book to reach out to the public about that. And so he wrote the book that you see here, and that is in your hands. And he said it all in ways that anybody can understand. Well, there is an index in there. There is an appendix listing the LD50s, the pain index from 0 to 4 of a whole lot of different species. And what you don't see in there is the LD50s. values. But you might reasonably expect, as I did, that pain and lethality would be strongly positively correlated. In other words, if it hurts more, it's more damaging. Apparently not. So I took some of Justin's data where he had quantified both of those, and I did just an ordinary correlation, a statistical correlation. And the correlation is next to nothing. The one has nothing in particular to do with the other. So for example, yes, please. Here we see a spider wasp, family Pompilidae, and she has just paralyzed a spider. Well, spider wasp venom has huge toxicity. No, pardon me. Let me take that back. Spider wasp venom is very, very painful. It really hurts to be stung by a spider wasp. But the toxicity is very, very low. Now, paralyzing power, we don't know. But toxicity is very, very low. On the other hand, there are some that have very high toxicity, but relatively low. They're not very painful. And then it's almost a random. Well, you can see how that makes sense from the spider wasp point of view. The spider wasp is very much interested in paralyzing that spider. The spider wasp is not interested in killing it or anybody else. The spider wasp is very much interested in causing you pain, or a bird or a lizard pain. Why it's so very painful, that probably cannot be explained by natural selection. It probably hurts.
Where are you getting spider
Um, oh, everywhere. They're worldwide. So you can look forward to being stung by them sometimes, and you can give a report. You know, you can look up the sting pain index. You can look it up, and there's a paper in my site. There's also allergy. So I myself, for instance, have been, after being stung by wasps, have had anaphylactic shock, and not terribly serious. I came out of it okay, but you know, it was a drag. It's I advise you to have nothing to do with it. And so from the wasp or bee's point of view, what is allergy good for? Probably completely irrelevant. Why would they be interested in causing allergy to you? So it's just something unfortunate that happens to a lot of people. Okay, now let me come to the final, so that, and some people, when they get repeatedly stung, they either become much more sensitive or much less sensitive, or it doesn't make much difference. Now, we see this with beekeepers. Beekeepers get stung a lot, and most beekeepers become relatively insensitive. So it doesn't bother them very much. Some get more sensitive, so they have to quit. And then some, it stays about the same. I have never been stung enough to notice that it makes a difference in me. Okay, now, not quite yet. So, the sting is a lie. When something is stinging you, it says, okay, here's a lot of pain. The tissue damage may be actually very, very slight. It's a lie in that respect. So when it still serves in self-defense. So why don't big animals just through natural selection become insensitive to it? And the answer is probably it's just not worth it. Well, many years ago, I looked at it like this. Okay, it's a lie, especially when you've got a very small colony of, say, wasps or bees. They're social, but they live in a very small colony. Then they can maybe drive you off by stinging or by threat of stinging, the damage they can do to you is nothing. But the pain they can cause you is out of proportion to that. Might this explain how social life gets started? So you take a solitary wasp or bee. They come one here, another one there, another one there, but you get you get a cluster of them together. Well, suddenly it's worthwhile for a predator to go and attack them because it can get many at a time. So might this ability to repel something much, much bigger, something size of a rat or even a manicou, for instance, from attacking your colony, might it explain how social life became possible? So I wrote a paper about that, and that's the paper that gives the title of today's talk. And I said, okay, I think this explains it. I think this is the key enabling mechanism that makes sociality in many lineages of Hymenoptera possible in the face of what would appear to be very strong disadvantages to group living. Well, there was a seminar group at Cornell University. And so this seminar group was made up of 2 professors and a gaggle of hotshot students. And one week, their subject for their seminar was this paper. And they looked at it and they critiqued it. And they decided, well, they wrote a paper about it, published it in the same journal. And it basically said, oh, well, Chris Starr is full of crap. They didn't put it that way. They put it in scientific terms. And they were very good about it. I mean, they sent me a copy of it ahead of time. Well, I looked at that and I decided, well, I am not full of crap. And so these hotshot Cornellians, I just took them apart piece by piece. It was not a fair fight, I tell you. But even today, not everybody agrees with me. And so the subject of whether the sting is the thing, in truth and in fact, remains controversial. Lights, please. Yes. Okay. A stunned silence.